What is the role of religion in our ever-changing world? From the News Channel 5 network, this is Issues of Faith.
Hello everyone and welcome. With all that has been in the news lately, it is certainly appropriate to talk about racial justice. How should churches respond to what we have seen in the news recently in Charlottesville and other places? And how should we all be thinking and talking about these issues? There is a new collaborative at Vanderbilt Divinity School that's addressing some of these issues. Happy to have with us Dr. Teresa Smallwood. She's the Associate Director of Vanderbilt Divinity School's Public Theology and Racial Justice Collaborative. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
All right, Racial Justice Collaborative, what is that?
This is the brainchild of the illustrious dean of the School of Divinity. And this idea comes together with work being done all over the country around how it is that critical thinkers can put their ideas together with those who are out there in the field, and really to bring together that sort of big tent group of folk who are working perhaps in silos all over the country into conversation with one another. The aim of this particular collaborative is simply to be sure that the conversation happens and that from that conversation good best practices take place. So one of the deliverables here is to put together a summer institute where we bring folks in from all over to be able to share what's happening. Racial justice is not something new. It is something that we have dealt with as a country forever. But now is a critical hour. And I think Vanderbilt has given us the opportunity of a lifetime to be able to speak to it.
So assess where we are right now as a nation. I think a lot of people thought we were making great strides. You know, we elected a black president. Then we see the pictures coming out of Charlottesville. Perhaps there's been a backlash. Where are we right now when it comes to racial justice issues?
Let me put on my public theology lens, because it is the theological that seems to gird everything we try to do at the collaborative. And from my perspective, what we have is a series of actions that have happened over the course of the last, I would say, decade. Inclusive of the Obama era, and giving rise to a moment in which people have been sort of hoodwinked. And I would say that where we are today is in a place where folk who are average, everyday human beings who go to work and who go to church or who go to some kind of mosque or temple or some place where they center their souls, we are at that place where everyone is reckoning with what does it mean to be American, what does it mean to be in American culture, and how is it that my faith can speak to the publics that I encounter and be well. We can say that the country is on a real topsy-turvy kind of place. And that has to do with a number of factors. It is not just what we see in the popular culture, it's not just what we see on TV. A good bit of what's happening in America is because people of faith, perhaps, have been siloed. And we're now being called to the big tent, to talk to one another, to reason with one another, and to be able to give a faith-based response to the kinds of structural evil that we see, and to the kinds of ways in which faith can help us move forward and steady the beat.
You talk about breaking down barriers of structural evil. What strikes me when you look at some of these racist organizations, white supremacy organizations, at the center they will talk about Christian values often. They are using God and Christianity. What do we do about that? What do you say about that? Is that historically, I guess that's happened, but here you have people that are passionate. They are now perhaps emboldened, and they are using Christian words and terms to talk about these racial things.
I think you have hit upon what I believe is the quintessential question. how is it that we get off track? When someone has been radicalized, what really typically happens is that they have taken something that is a kernel of truth and been mesmerized by the capacity for that to be derailed. And so, you know, what we're seeing today is not unlike what happened historically with the Third Reich. We are seeing a takeover of the very Christian values that we seem to always have pronounced. But the problem is it's being, in my view, idolatrized. That means simply that people have begun to worship a capacity to bring themselves into power. And that is not faith. So we are called now to a place where we have to really be discerning about what is truth and what is fake. And there are many, many efforts going on in this country that really do tap into a fake understanding of what religion, what faith, and what those values ought to be and have been for us as a positive in our country. Sometimes, and I don't know how to put this, sometimes before something is done away with, there is a lot of noise. In other words, it's darkest before the light. Mm-hmm. You know, you hear those kinds of things. Perhaps, do you feel like this is, best case scenario, the last great sort of stand of this racist culture, or is it much bigger than we realized and it could swamp us? Where do you think we are? Well, I hesitate to say precisely where we are. I can't call this the last big. Mm-hmm. But what I can say is that it is much bigger than people have assessed. And what makes it big is that there are people along the way who have basically taken advantage of folk who are radicalized. And they have actually tapped into the source of their own strength. That means the radical groups. These people have tapped into that strength and have tried to ride dovetail on it. And I'll give you an example. I believe at the present moment where we are in our democracy creates a real problem for people who are of faith. Because we see and we hear many efforts to stoke the fire of a very, very alternative right. And yet, there is this constant barrage of things being said that cause us all to really go into our prayer closets and wonder, what is God doing? And I think what this presents for us, and I really, really must amplify that I think this moment is a kairos moment. It's a moment in time when I believe faith people have to really give the serious thought about what their beliefs are and how they live those beliefs out. So what we're really calling people to is a lived theology. The capacity for you to bring what you know works out into the fore. Because they're bringing what they know. And so far it is working. If we look at it from a structural standpoint, we've got the President of the United States stoking some of the fires. We also have what I would call some legacy babies from the Civil War movement. I could name several of them. I don't choose to do that right now. But the idea here is to really, really discern where we are and recognize that consciousness raising really puts us in a place of hope and not despair. When you see these groups, as I talked about before, talking in Christian terms and Christian language, many churches right now are many, not all, are struggling to fill the pews. So say you're somebody that's on the outside, you've gone to church, you haven't gone to church, you're not an everyday sort of church attending Christian. You see some of this stuff that you think is terrible, and you see it wrapped in Christian terms, and that turns people away from the church. How did churches deal with that? I think you pose a question that we hope to be able to wrestle with. We have to hold these kinds of developments in tension until we come together. And one of the true blessings of this vision is the idea that we can bring people into a conversation. We're not trying to be a church. We're not trying to be a new organization. We're not trying to be a new movement even. What we're wanting to be is a hub where folks can come together and as a hub create the spokes that make the wheels turn. And what I find is that even every average day Christians, people who don't go to church, but who claim themselves to be spiritual and not religious, or at a place in their lives where they are not really nurturing anything in a structured fashion, still need a spot to come to. And where we have the opportunity here to really connect ourselves with some of the best of organizers, the best of activists, the best of clergy, and the best of academic thinkers, both students and faculty. It creates for me just the quintessential opportunity to figure out where we go from here.
Do you think, and we'll take a break after this question, do you think one place that we could wind up going is churches becoming more political? And that concerns some people. And then on the other hand, people say, well, many churches are already there on both sides. But do you think, where do you think we go? Could we become churches more political, or is that not the right answer?
I don't think as institutions, churches will become more political necessarily. But I will just point out that some wise people said way before I came onto the scene that the personal is the political. So you don't really separate out, and that's why lived theology means that you live out in the public the thing you believe. Let's face it, our vice president claims to be Christian. I don't have a doubt that he practices a certain variation of Christianity. The idea that he is the public voice of a particular Christianity says to me that it is political. But at the same time, he doesn't represent a church in his capacity. He represents the people. And what I hope is that we will have people in our churches who are politically minded, who are conscious, who understand the mores that are happening, and who have, through their faith, the impetus to put their work together with others and make a difference.
All right, very good. We'll take a break, come back, continue the discussion. Many people say the most segregated hour of the whole week is, of course, that Sunday worship hour. What do we do about that? How do we address that? We'll take a break. Be back right after this.